And we are here. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of the Lopes Goes Last podcast. I, of course, am your host, Tyler Lopes. If you have not subscribed yet, please feel free to do so. Also, hit that bell icon so you never miss any one of my videos. Also, please like and share, as it makes a huge difference in the success of this channel. And if you have not already, please follow me on Twitter at Lopes Goes Last and on Facebook at Lopes Goes Last podcast. Links to those will be down in the description below. Man, what a crazy couple of weeks it has been since I have had to talk about the Celtics. And it has just been a whirlwind, and at least in terms of this channel and this podcast, I have kept relatively quiet over the last few weeks, wanting to kind of get some more baseball content out there. But we're going to get right back to basketball here today, as this episode is going to be exclusively talking about the Eastern Conference and Western Conference Finals, and then, of course, the upcoming matchup for the NBA Finals between the Boston Celtics and the Golden State Warriors. So, if, basketball is not necessarily your thing, I do apologize, but that is what this podcast is going to be about. If you do love baseball, though, I did a fantastic interview with Wyatt Wewell just the other day. It is up on my channel now. By the time you're seeing this, it will have been up for several days at this point. And if you enjoyed that interview, I also did an interview last week with Max McCoy and Ben Fair. We also talked a lot about baseball, talked about different things, baseball conspiracy theories, baseball kind of superstitions and everything like that. The Reds, the Braves, talked about all that kind of stuff, and much, much more, of course. And so, certainly, if you love baseball, there is plenty of content on the channel already for you if you have not seen it. But, again, this episode is going to be exclusively about the Eastern Conference and Western Conference Finals, and, of course, the upcoming NBA Finals, and my thoughts on how I think it is going to go down. But, before I get into that, let's talk about the Western Conference Finals between the Golden State Warriors and the Dallas Mavericks. Of course, given that I said that the Golden State Warriors will be in the NBA Finals, that does, of course, mean that they were able to defeat the Dallas Mavericks relatively easily, to being honest, all things being equal. I really thought that the Dallas Mavericks and their defense would have had a much better shot against the Warriors than they did, but they really just didn't show up. And it was very strange to me because, I've seen the Dallas Mavericks defense up close when they played the Celtics back in, I think it was late January, maybe early February. It was right in the middle of the Celtics' kind of just huge hot streak that they went on in the second half of the season, and it's obviously carrying into now. But, I saw them play against the Celtics, who, again, were the hottest team in basketball at this point. They went into Boston and beat them. Legitimately. It wasn't like one of those games against the Pistons where the Celtics played terrible, or the Pacers where the Celtics played terrible, or something like that. It was, in Boston, the Celtics came out with a lot of energy, a lot of fire. The crowd was behind them, and the Dallas Mavericks just simply played better, which is what scared me about the Mavericks, is that they just played better. And if I remember correctly, Luka was not 100% at this time. Luka was kind of in and out of that game with, ankle and knee trouble. He was fairly effective when he was out there, but he was not particularly super involved like he is right now. Obviously, he's taking 25, 30 shots a game. He's putting up 35 points a night. He's absolutely ridiculous now. But, at the time that they played the Celtics back, and again, I think it was late January, early February, whatever it was, he was just kind of working his way back from injury, and he was kind of playing hurt. So he wasn't as effective as he could have been. And they still went out there and beat them. Fair and square, And that scared me about the Mavericks, is that their defense was almost as good as the Celtics' defense was. And on that day, the Mavericks went into Boston and played better than the Celtics at their hottest point in the season. That scared me about the Mavericks. And so when the Mavericks kind of started getting momentum and they beat Phoenix, I looked into this camera and I said, the Dallas Mavericks scare me. And I meant it. And man, did they not show up against the Warriors. Now, the Warriors defense did a really, really tremendous job against Luka for the most part. Luka was still fairly effective, averaging, 27, 28 points a night, but he was really ineffective in terms of his field goal percentage, in terms of the quality of looks he was getting, in terms of his playmaking ability. They really slowed him down. And what the Mavericks showed is that even though their defense was pretty solid, if you can slow down Luka, you have a really good chance of beating them. Because Luka, even with, all the other guys like Jalen Brunson, Dorian Finney-Smith, Spencer Dinwiddie, all these guys that are fairly reasonable offensive players, and obviously guys like Jalen Brunson that are, borderline all-star caliber scorers, at least in terms of what he has done over the past couple of months. Jalen Brunson has played great. And even with all those guys, those guys are still not enough offensively to carry the load if Luka is not firing on all cylinders. So if you can get Luka to not fire on all cylinders, you have a really, really good chance of winning. And the Golden State Warriors knew that, and they focused and tailored their entire defense on slowing down, not stopping, but slowing down Luka and his playmaking ability. Now, the Warriors, they played obviously fantastic all series long. Klay Thompson looks like he did 3 years ago, at least on the offensive end. He doesn't quite look the same on the defensive end, because before his injuries, he had a legitimate case of being the best defensive shooting guard in basketball, along with the best shooting guard in all of basketball at the same time. He was one of the best two-way number twos, which is the number that we assign shooting guards, for those of you who don't know, in basketball. He was one of the best two-way number twos in the league, if not the very best two-way number two in the league. So, he doesn't quite look that on top of it defensively, but he's still very, very good. He's still an above-average defender. Still somebody that you have to understand and that you can't just, do whatever you want against. He's still very, very smart, still knows what he's doing, and obviously still has most of the physicality and the physical attributes that he had before his injury. Now, I can't really say much about Steph Curry. He is Steph Curry. I mean, he's the greatest shooter in the history of this earth or any other earth, and we know what he's going to do. He's going to play good team defense. He's not the best individual defender in the world. He's still relatively undersized, and he's not the best athlete. So he's not going to be that guy that, stops you on the interior or is going to be quick enough to stay with you all the time in terms of one-on-one defense. But he fits that defensive scheme in Golden State very, very well. And he's a very willing defender, which I think is lost on today's kind of stars, or at least some of them. For instance, obviously the one that stands to mind is James Harden, where, I've seen him play really, really good defense on people when he is willing and when it's, when he absolutely has to, but he's just not that willing of a defender. He's not that person that's, going to raise his hand and say, give me, let me stop this guy. Let me stop Chris Paul. Let me stop Steph Curry. Let me stop somebody. He's not going to be that guy that raises his hand. He wants to play offense. He wants to be that guy. So, and then, again, I wouldn't say there's nothing wrong with that, but I understand that point of view. Steph Curry's not that. Steph Curry is a guy that, he's not the most skilled or physically gifted defender in the world, but he's very, very willing, and he fits that team defense and that defensive scheme very, very well. And they have surrounded him with not only good shooters and good playmakers, but good defenders as well. And I think that is a huge reason why the Golden State Warriors are so dominant this year, especially in the postseason. It's because their defense has shown up and stayed consistent, and their offense has slowly started to get back to that top-tier offense that we saw. I believe that right now they are sixth, would have been, the numbers that are putting up, obviously there's only 2 teams left, but they would have been 6th or 7th, somewhere in that range, in the NBA in offensive efficiency on the pace that they are playing right now. So certainly, they're not the number 1 offense, but earlier in the season, they were, average to below average all season long. And then, a lot of that was because Klay Thompson was not playing, and then when he was playing, he wasn't as effective as he usually is or nearly as efficient as he was. Jordan Poole had, he hadn't really he had played well all season, but he hadn't really, emerged as this 20-point per game scorer that he is now. And obviously they lost Draymond for a couple of months. And so, his playmaking was missed. He's not the best, just straight up shooter that they have. He's quite frankly very below average at that. But his playmaking ability cannot be replaced on the offensive end. He's the guy that usually runs the offense, not Steph Curry. So, he wasn't super great offensively. Andrew Wiggins, as good as he is defensively, is still fairly inconsistent on the offensive end. Sometimes he can go for 35. Sometimes he'll go for 5. It's just kind of that, you never really know which Andrew Wiggins is going to show up on the offensive end. So, and obviously you could throw in guys like Gary Payton II who aren't really great offensively. And again, Steph Curry. He's been great his whole career, but even he missed some time with injury. So there's certainly some kind of patterns that you could see as to why the Golden State Warriors didn't have the best offense on paper that as they're kind of showing now early in the season. But now with Klay Thompson, balling out in the postseason and getting mostly back to his former glory shooting-wise, Steph Curry being who he is, Draymond being fully healthy, Jordan Poole showing up as, this borderline all-star player coming off the bench, and sometimes even starting for them. Jonathan Kuminga, the rookie, has played very, very well this year on the offensive end and has honestly carried some of the load, especially when the other guys on the team were out, even though he's playing for now the team that has gone to 6 finals in 8 years as a 19-year-old. I mean, the first time the Golden State Warriors went to the finals, this guy was like 12 years old or 13 years old. I mean, it's just crazy to think about. The fact that, he was watching these games, when the Warriors were coming up, I was 15, 16. I was in high school. He was still in middle school, this guy. And now he's playing for them, and he's got a chance to help them win another championship. And same goes for Moses Moody as well. I don't know as much about Moses Moody as I do Jonathan Kuminga, but both these guys are very, very young, and they have made a difference on this team. James Wiseman is another guy that, he's been injured for most of the season, so we haven't gotten to see, the impact that he could have made. But, you don't just have a great present in Golden State. You have an amazing future as well. Because the Golden State Warriors have been injured and played terrible the last few years, they have 3 fantastic young players that they can build around for the future. And it's really, really awesome to see that. And it is a little scary, of course, because, you're talking about now you might be able to build an absolute juggernaut out there in Golden State as if they don't already have one. But, and that's not even, that's not even including somebody like an Otto Porter, who at this point barely, if ever, plays. But even he is a guy that's very, very capable of making and creating his own shot coming off the bench if they ever, for whatever reason, need another offensive surge. So this Warriors team is dangerous, and they are playing just at an absolutely elite level. And so, combining all those reasons, that's why the Warriors have been so much better than their record has showed in the regular season. They were the 3rd seed in the West. Phoenix ran away with the West. And then, it was Memphis and then Golden State right behind them. So, on paper, the Golden State Warriors were like the 5th or 6th best team in the NBA, and they are just running the table right now with all these teams. Now, granted, their path to the finals has been a little bit easier than the Celtics have, which I'll get into later. But, and again, there is that kind of reasoning that they're showing that as well. They haven't had a ton of kind of challenges so far this year. The Grizzlies gave them the biggest challenge of their entire playoff. And anybody who saw, my kind of predictions as to what I thought would happen, I thought the Golden State Warriors would beat them in 5. I had zero confidence in the Memphis Grizzlies beating the Warriors. Now, I've also said that they are a little bit better of a team without Ja, and they played better without Ja. I mean, they stole that one game where Ja Morant put up like 50 points and 13 assists or something ridiculous like that. He balled out of his mind, and the Golden State Warriors shot like 28% from 3. Like, the Warriors played awful. The Grizzlies and Ja Morant played absolutely out of their mind, and they won by like 4 or something. So, like, they stole that, and it was in Memphis. So they stole that game because, everything went exactly right for the Memphis Grizzlies for one game. And then Ja Morant gets hurt, and they win another game. Like, that, to me, again, that kind of still shows that Ja Morant, that they're better without Ja, to me. But I still had no confidence that they were going to be able to beat the Warriors, and of course, it really wasn't that close of a series. If you kind of look at it, it wasn't that close. But even that was still their biggest challenge of the postseason. So that is also another reason why they're looking as dominant as they have, is because they haven't really had a big challenge yet. And I think Phoenix would have maybe given them that challenge, although hindsight's 2020. If they played like they did against Dallas, then they would have been absolutely run off the floor. But the Warriors are, they're still the Warriors. They still have the same core that they did back in 2014, 2015, when they started this dominant run. You've got the core of Steph, Clay, and Draymond. You've got that culture, you've got that stability. But now, I think a few years ago when we were talking about the Warriors, it's like, yeah, you've got all these guys, in your starting lineup that are really good, but, who else do you have? You don't really have a center, which, granted, they still don't. Again, Kevon Looney, no disrespect to Kevon Looney, but he's not on anybody's all-star radar. He might be an average NBA big at best. So, no offense to Kevon Looney, and he's played great throughout this postseason, and he's given them great minutes, and he's done very well for them, and he's done his job, which I guess is all you can ask for. But in terms of they don't have a prime DeMarcus Cousins like they tried to have at the center position. They don't have a full potential, possibly a guy that can average 15 and 13 James Wiseman at center. If all goes right with his career, although it's been off to a very rough start injury-wise. And he hasn't even really been all that effective when he has been out there. So I am starting to get a little worried about James Wiseman, but that's for another time. They don't have that, but they do have these other pieces that I mentioned. Andrew Wiggins, former number 1 pick in the draft, very famously was the guy that basically LeBron traded to Minnesota to get Kevin Love. And Cleveland obviously ends up winning a championship. And Andrew Wiggins, he didn't play horrible. He was never a horrible player. A lot of people make it sound like he was absolutely atrocious in Minnesota, and he wasn't. The problem is that he was average to slightly above average. And for a number 1 pick, that is not good. You do not want to have a number 1 pick in the draft that is average to slightly above average. That is why so many people give Markelle Fultz so much crap, although they haven't given him nearly as much active crap as they did in his first couple of years, because his first couple of years were just so sad. And again, that's another video for another day. I'm definitely going to do kind of a synopsis on Markelle Fultz and what happened with him and his first couple of years, and his first couple of years in the NBA, and what happened in Philly, and then what's happening now with Orlando. But again, nonetheless, that's for a different day. And back to Wiggins, it was kind of like that, where, these guys are kind of looking at him going, this guy's a number 1 pick in the draft, and he's, average. And, he's twitchy, he's athletic, but he's not a great shooter. He's athletic, and again, he's very twitchy, but his defense is kind of lacking considering his athletic ability. And, he might score 30 points, but he also might score 2 points, and he might just not show up. And, I was watching an interview on CLNS Media, which is a great YouTube channel that kind of covers all the Celtics stuff, and they also cover Patriots and Red Sox stuff at times as well. They're great, so if you are a Celtics fan and you want to watch some content about the Celtics, other than this, of course, go over there because they are great. I was watching an interview, and one of the guys on there, I can't remember which one, said that, he was kind of working for... I don't know if it was Boston or if it was for another team, and they happened to be playing Minnesota that day, and he was, back, in the locker room area, and Andrew Wiggins was kind of just hanging around, just being himself. He wasn't trying to impress anybody or do anything specific. He was just kind of, acting like him as himself. And this guy was saying that, he took one look at Andrew Wiggins and said, this guy's never going to figure it out. Just his personality and just the way he carried himself and just kind of the way he looked and acted. This guy kind of looked at Andrew Wiggins and said, I don't think this guy even cares. I don't think this guy wants to be here. I don't think he even is here mentally. I think that he just is kind of an NBA player that may or may not ever figure it out. And, we kind of saw the writing on the wall a little bit when Jimmy Butler was in Minnesota, because, people forget that Jimmy Butler was in Minnesota for a time. They traded a whole bunch of stuff to Chicago to get Jimmy Butler, including the number 5 pick in the draft, who ended up being Chris Dunn. But, you know, in hindsight, great trade for Minnesota. But nonetheless, you know, Andrew Wiggins, Karl Anthony Towns, and Jimmy Butler were on the same team at the same time. And Jimmy Butler was, you know, he's been very vocal saying that, you know, he did not think that Minnesota could win without him because they were soft and they didn't care enough. And I think we can all take one look at Karl Anthony Towns right now and know that that is not true of him. That man cares a lot, and he is very, very, you know, expressive and very loud and very, very just abrasive when he plays. Now, does abrasiveness always translate to caring? No, but oftentimes when somebody can get overly emotional about how they're playing or what's going on in the court, that usually translates to caring. I mean, look at guys like, you know, the two biggest examples of guys that are very loud, very obnoxious, and very abrasive on the court are Marcus Smart and Draymond Green, the two, you know, anchors defensively on either side of the finals matchup this year. And those are basically the two biggest examples. And those guys care about their team and winning and making, you know, winning plays, diving for loose balls, taking charges, more than pretty much anybody in the NBA. So a lot of times that kind of expressiveness really translates to, you know, wanting to win and wanting to be successful. So you can't say, you know, maybe back then it might have been true, but right now, you can't say that Karl Anthony Towns does not care. And so what does that mean? That means that your core, the rest of your core, probably doesn't care about winning all that much. And the rest of your core at that point was Andrew Wiggins. So, you know, it was really starting to look like Andrew Wiggins was, you know, he was going to be an average NBA player. He might play, you know, 12, 15 years as just being average and never really live up to that potential. And I don't think he ever actually will live up to the potential of being the number 1 pick. At this point, he just doesn't seem to have it in him offensively. But soon as he got to Golden State, they unlocked something in him defensively and effort-wise that he just did not have. They unlocked that edge for him, and he has just been a revelation in Golden State. I mean, I cannot say enough about how fun it has been to watch him play, and how happy I am because, you know, I will never root for somebody to fail. If somebody is a number 1 pick or a number 2, number 3, whatever, high first-round pick, and they don't make it, to me, that's very sad. I loved Chris Dunn coming out of the draft, and he just never could develop, you know, offensively. Dennis Smith Jr. was honestly one of my favorite players back when he got drafted in that entire class. And he just could never put it together. Now, granted, there was some other stuff that happened in Dallas that didn't help him either. For instance, after his first year of actually playing pretty well, they handed the point guard keys to Luka Doncic, which obviously in hindsight was the best decision they could have made. But still, for Dennis Smith, that had to have been very, very sad. But nonetheless, again, that's another video for another day. Because I'm just giving you guys a whole bunch of sneak peeks of stuff I'm going to be talking about down the road. But nonetheless, you know, whenever I see a high draft pick that ends up not working out, it genuinely makes me sad. You know, it really, really does, because I want to watch good basketball. That's just my thing. I just want to watch good basketball. I want to watch good baseball. I want to watch good football. You know, every once in a while, I might want to watch some good playoff hockey, even though I have no idea what's going on. But, you know, that's really it. I just want to watch good athletic competition. And when, you know, I see a guy that is drafted really high that doesn't work out, it's upsetting because, you know, you could see the potential of how amazing that could have been, and it just ended up not happening. And unfortunately, that happens a lot more often than I think any of us would really like it to happen. And I kind of just figured that would happen to Andrew Wiggins. But now, watching him in Golden State, you know, he hasn't unlocked, I don't think he unlocked his full potential because, you know, there were people that were comparing him to Kobe coming out of the draft, which, I mean, that's insane considering his offensive struggles. But, you know, I guess I can understand it athletic-wise, but definitely not mentality-wise, and definitely not offensively-wise. I don't know however you say that. But nonetheless, you know, now he's kind of unlocked a little bit of that athleticism and unlocked that defensive ability to where honestly, if I had to pick, other than Draymond Green, who, I mean, clearly is far and away their best defensive player, their second best defensive player to me is Andrew Wiggins, which, I mean, that's amazing to kind of think about considering how far he's come in that kind of way. So this Warriors team, again, much deeper than they have been in years past. In past years, they've had like their big three when they had KD, their big four, and that's it. They had nobody else. Now, you've got Steph Curry in his prime. Klay Thompson, not sure if he's still in his prime considering the injuries, but, I mean, he's right at the end of his prime, for sure. Draymond Green, right at the end of his prime, probably. Andrew Wiggins has unlocked big potential for him. He's a great number 4 option for them. Absolutely. He's probably their number 4 option on offense, excuse me, if I could speak. So I think that makes sense. Jordan Poole has come off the bench and is dropping 15, 20, 25 points a night. I mean, he's really, really developed over the last year or two. You got Jonathan Kuminga coming off the bench. Gary Payton, he's not a big offensive guard, but he can really step in there and guard just about anybody on the perimeter, as good as almost anybody in the league, much like his father. Although he's not quite the defender that his father was. Gary Payton Sr. was that dude defensively for sure. And so, they've just got so many weapons that they usually don't have, and it's because of their patience, and it's because of staying the course. And, again, unfortunately, it is because of also injuries to Steph Curry and to Klay Thompson and to Draymond Green over the last couple of years that have allowed them to stockpile these draft picks and now are developing them to where it's not just on 3 guys to win. You've got 5, 6, maybe even 7 guys that, can really help you on the offensive end. And again, none of this is even including Kevon Looney, who is their starting center, who, he could drop 10 or 12 points, if you let him, climb that offensive glass and you really kind of just leave him by himself completely. He's not completely useless out there, for sure. So it's really just an amazing thing to see how deep the Warriors are. And I was that person when the season started looking at the roster of the Warriors and said, I don't know how anybody's not picking them to go back to the finals. Golden State's going back to the finals, for sure, because I didn't believe in the Lakers. I really didn't think the Westbrook and LeBron thing would work, and it really didn't. And then also AD only played like 30 games. I wasn't the biggest, I didn't think the Grizzlies would perform as well as they did. I certainly was not a believer in the Phoenix Suns. I thought last year was an anomaly. And they really proved that it may not have necessarily been an anomaly, but they certainly underperformed in the playoffs this year, so I wasn't super concerned about them. And I didn't really think there was any other team in the West that was as good as the Warriors could have been. So quite frankly, I was like, yeah, the Warriors are going to the finals, and obviously that turned out to be true. But I feel like kind of looking back with hindsight, it made a lot of sense. The Warriors have the same team they did 7 or 8 years ago when this whole thing started, except they're a little bit deeper now. And a little bit more athletic. And a little, obviously a lot more experienced in terms of, your big three and that championship medal and that championship drive. They have all that now. Obviously, Steve Kerr is one of the best coaches in basketball. They have a great front office that's willing to take risks and willing to do all that stuff. So the Warriors, and again, I started all this by talking about the Western Conference Finals. It made way too much sense to me that they were just going to go and roll over the Mavericks. I didn't think that it would end up just kind of being an easy breezy kind of thing, but I felt like the Warriors would win in 6 or 5. Maybe a close 5. I didn't think it would go 7, but maybe a really close 5 where the Warriors would scrape out a couple of wins by 1 or 2 points, but it was really just blowout city from the jump. And so the Dallas Mavericks, again, they didn't really show up all that much, and it was really kind of sad to see because I thought it would be a much better series than it was, but it wasn't. And the Warriors now obviously going to the finals, and we'll see if they can win a championship. All right. Moving on to the Eastern Conference Finals, the series that aged me to the point I'm pretty sure I'm getting close to dust. If Thanos showed up right now, he wouldn't even have to snap his fingers. I would just turn into dust. So, This series, it was one of those where, as a Celtics fan, you kind of just marvel at the wild inconsistency of both teams. And, again, I could talk all the live long day about how frustrated I am and have been over the last several years with the fact that the Boston Celtics cannot close games. I mean, they just have not been able to. We saw it in Game 7. For those of you who did not see it in Game 7, I'm going to tell you what happened from my perspective. The Celtics grew a 13-point lead in the fourth quarter against the Heat in Game 7 with 3 minutes left, maybe like 3 minutes and 10 seconds left, something like that. And with 2 minutes and 25 seconds left in the game, they had an 11-point lead. So you're sitting there thinking, cool. The Celtics need to make probably one more basket. Just one. Maybe get fouled, get a couple of free throws, you're already in the bonus, whatever. You put in a couple of more points, this thing's over. It doesn't matter what the Heat do. They can make every shot from now until the end of the game. You make a basket or you get a couple free throws. All you got to do is milk the clock and you're done. They're done. And instead, what the Celtics decided to do is say, okay, who's on the floor? Jason Tatum, who made first team All-NBA because he averaged 27, 8, and 5 this year. Jaylen Brown, who made another All-Star team, averaging 25 points a night and has become a pretty decent playmaker in his own right. And Al Horford, who is kind of, he's the guy, he's your security blanket, He may not be the best scorer in the world, but we saw against Milwaukee, he's capable of going off when his number is called. And you also on the court have Grant Williams at this point because Robert Williams was not very effective in Game 7. He looked reasonably hurt. He was not very effective. So Grant Williams was basically playing the whole game. And he's a 40% three-point shooter this year. He's just really come alive from three-point range. He's made a couple in this game already. So, that's who you have on the floor. And then you also have Marcus Smart. Now, granted, Marcus Smart had already scored 20-something points at this point. He had a great offensive game. But when I look at all of those guys taking shots, the last person that I want to take a shot in that moment is Marcus Smart. Now, I have said on this channel before that Marcus Smart is so unbelievably infuriating to me because when you have two of the best closers in basketball in Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, why are you touching the basketball? Why are you the one that's shooting it? Why are you the one that's going to the basket and trying to throw up shots instead of those two guys? Nonetheless, Marcus Smart decides that not only is he going to take the final shot, or 2 shots of the game, which would have been bad enough, he decided to take 5 shots in a row, starting from about 2 minutes and 40 seconds to 15 seconds left in the game. He took 5 shots. Now, there were a couple turnovers by other players in there, one by Grant Williams and one by Jaylen Brown. They were thrown in there too. But out of the last 5 shots that the Celtics took from 2 minutes and 40 seconds to 15 seconds left in the game, Marcus Smart took all 5. He bricked all 5. And Miami scored a transition 2 or 3-point shot all 5 times, cut the lead to 2. And then Marcus Smart, who I've watched that play back over and over again. Jaylen Brown is wide open on the right wing. Wide open. Nobody's there. You know why nobody's there? Because everybody, their mother, their grandmother, their aunts, their uncles, their cousins, their second cousins, their third cousins, their cousin's unborn child. Everybody in the world knew that Marcus Smart was going to put his head down and throw up something at the basket. And that is exactly what he did. He didn't shoot the basketball. He literally just dribbled and just kind of threw up the basketball at the basket relatively. It kind of hit the backboard and kind of hit the rim maybe. And then the Miami Heat had the ball down by 2 with 15 seconds left. There were no timeouts. There was 1 foul call and 1 live ball turnover. So this whole time, there is 1 stoppage of play, which is the Jaylen Brown offensive foul. Now, there was a review. So I would say that this 3 minutes-ish of game time lasted about 5 minutes. So my heart and my soul and my brain and my body and my entire existence for 5 straight minutes, is just melting. Like, completely melting, along with the Celtics, apparently. That they have just decided that for the last 2 minutes of this game, they are not going to play basketball. They are all going to stand there while Marcus Smart loses the game. And no one's going to call a timeout. No one's going to say, hey, Marcus, maybe stop doing that. Nothing. They're just going to lose a chance to go to the NBA Finals because Marcus Smart has decided to take this upon himself, and no one's going to stop him. Now, that wasn't the only reason that run happened. Obviously, they didn't get a single stop at the defensive end either. And Max Strus made a ridiculous three-pointer with 2 or 3 hands in his face while fading away and fading sideways from the right corner, and it still went in somehow. It was an absolutely horrible shot. Like, I would not have been surprised if he airballed it, but it somehow went in. So there was certainly, some luck involved. And, there was several things. Then obviously the turnover by Grant Williams and then the offensive foul by Jaylen Brown, those didn't help either. So there was certainly, Marcus Smart was not the only person he wasn't the only one to blame. But that's kind of what I was thinking at the time. I'm like, Marcus, stop it! Like, I'm losing my mind. And then Jimmy Butler pulls up from 3. And my heart turned into my kidneys. Like, my heart went from here to here in a matter of a millisecond. When he rose up for that shot, and Al Horford was not close enough to him to get a decent contest, although he did the best he could, I was like, that's it. We just blew a 13-point lead like that. And we're not gonna go to the NBA Finals because we decided that we did not care enough. And by the grace of the Lord himself, he missed, which, quite frankly, anybody who watched Game 6 and Game 7, I don't think there was a single human being alive that thought he was going to miss that. Because Jimmy Butler had turned back into Jimmy Buckets and was making everything. I mean, he shot, 68% from the field in Game 6 and Game 7, and 55% or 58% from 3, when he was a 30% three-point shooter in the regular season and a 47% player from the field in the regular season, and he metamorphosized into Michael Jordan for 2 games. There was no chance he was missing that, and yet somehow he missed it. And I will address this right now before I continue. Stop hating on Jimmy Butler for taking that shot, because if I was Jimmy Butler, I would have taken that shot too. Now, granted, that's one of the many reasons, along with this, that I'm not in the NBA. But if I was Jimmy, I mean, forget it. I've played all 48 minutes, and I played 47 minutes in Game 6, all with a knee injury. And I dropped 47 points in Game 6, and I'm about to drop 40 in Game 7. I want to go to the NBA Finals. If I drive on Al Horford, 1, my shot might get blocked because he's already backpedaling and he's a great defender. 2, I might get fouled and not make the shot, and you never really know what happens. I might miss a free throw, especially how exhausted I am right now. And 3, what if I just miss the layup? Now, granted, you could say, what if I miss the three-pointer, and it's much more likely to miss a three-pointer, and I understand that. But I could kind of see all that. And even if I make the layup, what if, we tie the game, Celtics might have one more chance, they might score. And even if they don't score, we got to go into overtime. I've already played 48 minutes tonight and 47 minutes last night. None of my teammates, other than the last 2 minutes of the game, have done anything of note. Other than Bam Adebayo, he played pretty well in Game 7. So what am I supposed to do? I'm going to go for the kill shot. I'm going to go for the throat. I'm going to go for my Michael Jordan moment. I understand it. I do. It's unfortunate for him and for the Heat that he didn't make it. He didn't make the shot. And you could see by the way he missed that shot that he was tired. He missed it off left and front rim, which, as somebody who played basketball for, their entire childhood all the way up through high school, when I was tired, my shot was short and to the left because I would not have as much of my legs underneath me, and I would, instead of following through, I would kind of throw it like a baseball. Now, when obviously when you throw a baseball properly, you pronate like this, but, when you're tired, you kind of fall through like that. So when you're shooting it and you're tired, you kind of like this, a little bit. At least in my experience. That's obviously different for different people. But for me, when I was tired, my shot was short and to the left, and Jimmy Butler's shot was short and to the left. So to me, that made it. I looked at that and I went, man, this guy's he's exhausted. And you could see after the game, he was exhausted. He had literally put the entire city of Miami on his back, and he darn near pulled it off. So nothing but respect for Jimmy Butler here on this channel, and I will not tolerate otherwise. I couldn't stand how many people in the media, how many people on Twitter, all these people saying, I cannot believe that Jimmy Butler had the ego and audacity to take that shot and cost us the series. Cost you the series? He's the only reason you were in the series to begin with. Did you see how everybody else played? Kyle Lowry dropped 15 points or something in Game 6. I don't think he dropped 15 points total in the rest of the series. Max Strus at one point went like 0 for 18 from the field. Bam Adebayo, other than his reasonably good performance in Game 7 and his really, really great performance in Game 4 in Boston, he was Game 3, he was invisible. He was putting up like 6 points a night. Like, he was invisible. He didn't do anything on the offensive end. PJ Tucker had one good game, and that's pretty much it. Duncan Robinson never played, and your second best player, arguably, obviously Bam Adebayo, but your second best offensive player, certainly, in Tyler Hero, missed 4 games because of a groin injury. And when he played, he was averaging only about 2/3 of his regular season average. He was averaging about 13.5, 14 points a night. The rest of your team didn't show up. If you're the Miami Heat, I'm sorry. They really just didn't. Not consistently, anyway. In Game 6, when you won in Boston, Jimmy Butler had some help, and he needed all the help he can get because you guys still almost lost. In the rest of the series, he had no help. He had no help except for Game 3, when Bam Adebayo carried the team by himself, basically. So, whoever is blaming Jimmy Butler for the Heat losing, you have no clue what you're talking about. You just don't. I watched every game of this series. Without Jimmy Butler, there is no series. Yeah, he didn't play all that great in some games, but he was also very, very hurt. So, I'm so sick of hearing and seeing people just crapping all over Jimmy Butler. He's the only reason you were where you were. It's that simple. Nonetheless, Celtics pull it out in Game 7, and we're going on to the NBA Finals. But as for the rest of the series, going back to my original point, it is just so crazy to see how inconsistent both teams were. Now, again, think about this. The Boston Celtics won 3 games in Miami. 3 games in Miami. If you had told me before the series started that the Celtics won not 1 game in Miami, but 3 in Miami, I would have been like, so we won in 5, right? Like, we won in 5 because, we won both games in Miami, and then maybe we lost 1 game in Boston, and then we beat them again in Game 5. No, this series went 7 games, which means the Celtics also lost twice at home, which is insane considering you beat them 3 times in Miami. If you go into someone else's house and beat them 3 times, that's supposed to show that you are the dominant force in that series. But instead, when the Celtics went home, I don't know if it was just the Heat figuring something out or being more comfortable on the road, or the Celtics just being completely just absent mentally, or if it was both. I would say it's both, but it was just crazy to see. And I mean, it was blowout city for most of the series. Game 6 was a blowout for a lot of the series, or a lot of the game, excuse me. Game 4 was a blowout for most of the game. Game 1 was a blowout. Game 2 was a blowout. And Game 5 was a blowout. Like, it was just, they were flip-flopped. Like, Game 1, the Celtics got blown out. Game 2, the Heat got blown out. Game 3, the Heat got blown out. Game 4, the Celtics got blown out. Or maybe, vice versa. Game 3, the Celtics got, blown out in one quarter, although they ended up making it close, but it was basically a complete blowout. In Game 4, the Celtics came out and dominated. It was just a seesaw the whole time. And those are the worst. That was probably the worst series to watch as a Celtics fan, because you literally would turn on the television and go, man, I have no idea what's going to happen today. None. I had no clue which team was going to show up that day, which is just the scariest feeling as a Celtics fan. Now, after the Game 3 loss, right? After we had, after the Game 6 loss, I sat there and I was like, okay, I still think we can win this series. I really, really do. But let me tell you, back in Game 3, when the Celtics lost at home, without Jimmy, with the Heat without Jimmy Butler, I looked at that and I said it on Twitter. I'm like, I'm out. I'm done. I can't do it. Like, I could not believe that the Celtics blew their chance, because I didn't think that the Celtics would beat the Heat in Miami again. I really didn't. Now, obviously, if I had known what Miami Heat team was going to show up in Game 5, I would have clearly picked the Celtics to win. But when I saw the Celtics not be able to beat the Miami Heat supporting cast in Boston, I went, we're not winning the series. We're going to get murdered for the rest of the series. Like, I was so done with the Celtics. I was done. I was like, I'm out. I can't even watch. And yet somehow I was still watching. And I didn't want to, but I'm glad I did, because they won Game 4 and Game 5, and it gave me perspective that I genuinely thought the Celtics were the better team. And we are really good at responding after losses. And so when we lost Game 6, it was heartbreaking. And I really wanted them to win Game 6, 1, because it was at home, and 2, because they'd get an extra couple days of rest before taking on the Warriors, which, considering, Jason Tatum's, banged up, Marcus Smart's got a pretty serious ankle injury that he's playing through, and Rob Williams, God bless him, but I think he's come back way too soon from a meniscus surgery. I've said it multiple times. And he's basically been day-to-day with a quote-unquote bone bruise in his knee. And they said he's day-to-day for the rest of the postseason, which, if it's a bruise, why is it affecting you that much? Now, I've had bone bruises in my hips before that are so absurdly painful, and I can only imagine that it's something similar. But after a while, it's been two and a half, 3 weeks at this point. I know you're playing every other night, but, you're not getting any better at all? It's almost like, again, it's like a flip of a coin as to which Rob Williams you're going to get. Is it going to be the Rob Williams that showed up in Game 5 with all these blocks and, changing everybody's shot and running out to the three-point line and blocking P.J. Tucker and blocking Max Strus and all that stuff? Or is he going to be the one that you saw in Game 7 who was so ineffective that you couldn't even play him in the second half? He was in there for, a minute and a half in the second half, and the Celtics went from being up 14 to up 3, in a minute, because he just couldn't do anything on offense or defense. You just never know which Rob Williams is going to show up, and it's not his fault if he's genuinely hurt like that. He can't control that, but at the same time, it's frustrating. So, I just never knew which team for either side was going to show up in this series. And, it was very frustrating, I'm sure, for casual fans, too, because these games were bad. They were not good games to watch, other than Game 7, which was, I think, one of my favorite games of the entire postseason to watch, because, maybe there wasn't a ton of intrigue for the first 3 quarters and 10 minutes, but the last 2 minutes, for a if I wasn't a Celtics fan, I would have been screaming at my TV, let's go, Jimmy, let's come all the way back. I would have been, because it was really, looking back with hindsight and knowing in the end that my team would win and it would be okay and I wouldn't have to go cry in the corner somewhere, I was like, man, this is so amazing to watch. The Heat just never quitting until the very last millisecond where they knew they couldn't do it. And that's just a beautiful thing to watch, because a lot of athletes just don't want it like that. Ben Simmons, Kyrie Irving, some guys just don't want it like that. And it's sad to see when guys don't want it like that. But it's really, really awesome to see when guys do want it like that. And, again, I've said this already, but there was so much hate for Jimmy Butler. Just hearing his post-game comments after Game 7, he still felt like he didn't do enough, which is just insane to think at how amazing this guy played, and he still felt like he didn't do enough. Now, if the Celtics had beaten them in Game 6, yeah, Jimmy Butler probably didn't do enough. He didn't do enough in the other games in the series to warrant, me defending him at this point. But he scored 40 in Game 1. He scored 47 in Game 6 and almost 40 again in Game 7. Yes, the other 4 games he didn't play all that great. Or some of it he didn't play at all. But, to think that his team was still in position to win until legitimately 10 seconds left in the fourth quarter of Game 7 when he missed that shot. That's just a testament to his will. And it was an unbelievable game to watch. And Jimmy Butler, I think I'm guilty of this too. And I certainly am guilty of this. And a lot of people are, overlooking him in the superstar conversation. And it's because at times he's not super aggressive. And he's very passive and he doesn't shoot the ball a lot. Ime Udoka after Game 5 said that they were basically guarding him like a non-shooting big. They were just having Rob Williams or Al Horford guard him and sag off of him because they knew he wasn't going to shoot. And even if he did shoot, he wasn't going to make it. When that Jimmy Butler shows up, he's not a superstar, but when Jimmy Buckets shows up, there's few in the world that are better than him. Few. I firmly believe that Jason Tatum is a top 10 player in the NBA right now. He made first team All-NBA this year. He's only 24 years old. I still can't believe he's that young, but I do. I think he's top 10 in the NBA. Jimmy Butler ran circles around Jason Tatum those last 2 games. Not because Jason Tatum played bad either. Jason Tatum dropped 30 points in Game 6. It was a little bit inefficient. Or actually, no, it wasn't inefficient. It was low volume. He didn't shoot a lot. And in Game 7, again, didn't shoot all that much and didn't shoot particularly well, but he still dropped 27 or 28 or whatever it was points. Didn't play poorly. But Jimmy Buckets just ran circles around him. Because when aggressive Jimmy Butler shows up, there are few in the world that can hold the candle to how he plays. Truly. It's a remarkable thing to see. And I wish, well, maybe I don't wish, it would be nice to see Jimmy Butler kind of showing up like that all the time. Unless he's playing the Celtics, and I don't want to see that anywhere near me. But, again, this was just a knockdown, drag-out brawl of a series. 2 very, very physical defensive teams just going at it. It almost felt like a different guy was winning you or losing the game, winning you or losing you the game every night. And, again, even though the games themselves might not have been all that bad, the end result we got was a 7-game series that in Game 7 it came down to the wire. And I think the entire NBA world thinks, other than Heat fans and, the actual Miami Heat players and staff, I think the whole world probably thinks that the better team, the team that deserved to go more, won. Or maybe not deserved to go more. You can definitely argue that the Heat wanted it more. It's almost like the Celtics were like, please, just win already. But, they didn't. So, I think that you could still say that the better team won. And it's nice to see a different team in the finals other than, the same kind of few teams that we've seen over the last few years. Now, obviously, the Warriors are one of those teams. But other than that part of it, it's nice to see. I'm sure it's nice for other people to see, oh, it's not LeBron James and Kevin Durant all the time. It's a new crop of players on the Eastern side that are going to make it to the finals. It's not Giannis again. Although, nothing wrong with Giannis being in the finals. He's a fantastic player. I think he's the best player in the world. But, it is I'm sure it is kind of nice for some people to kind of look up and say, oh, it's, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown in the finals. That's new. That's different. Al Horford. Oh, I almost forgot. The fact that Al Horford is making his first finals just makes me smile from ear to ear. It is so awesome to see. I was a huge fan of his when he was in Atlanta. Wasn't a huge fan of the Hawks because they always seem to beat the Celtics. But he's a phenomenal player, and what he has done for our franchise in Boston, the leadership, the stability, the fact that he has worked on his game to kind of, develop into what a modern big can be, which is a guy, he's not the best shooter in the world, but certainly you can't leave him alone out there because he will drop 30 points on you. Just ask the Milwaukee Bucks. And he's, at 35, still a top-tier perimeter and interior defender. I mean, just amazing to see how he has played. And to see his evolution from when he got to Boston, where, he was just kind of an interior big that could post up and that, could shoot a mid-range pretty well, but wasn't really rebounding a whole lot. Couldn't really beat you over the top of an alley-oop, but then maybe every once in a while, and not to say he was a bad player, he was great at what he did, but to develop now into a guy that very rarely operates in the post, and a guy that's going to operate around the perimeter, and how amazing of a playmaker he is, and the fact that this is one of, if not his very best rebounding seasons in the NBA. He is so vastly improved in that department. I mean, when he got to the Celtics, I think his career average for rebounds was like 6.2 per game. Like, he wasn't that guy that was going to go up and snag you 12, 13, 15 rebounds, and now he is that guy that can go up and snag you 12, 13, 15 rebounds. He's not doing that every game, obviously, but he certainly is capable of doing that, especially once Rob Williams got injured. He was really tasked with being a guy that can rebound a lot. Now, luckily for Al, unlike his prior years in Boston, he has guys that can rebound now. Jaylen Brown's averaging 6 or 7 a night. Jason Tatum's averaging 8 a night. Marcus Smart's averaging 4 or 5 rebounds a night. Obviously, you've got Rob Williams in the interior that can rebound pretty well. Daniel Tice, coming off the bench, can rebound pretty well. Grant Williams, he doesn't have great rebounding numbers in terms of volume, but when he's in there, he's certainly very capable of throwing a good box out and getting some rebounds. And even some of the guards, like Derek White, can rebound. So you've got help, but he still is rebounding at a very, very, impressive rate this year. And just the fact that he's making his first finals at 35 years of age, after being in the league for 15 or 16 years at this point, and being in the conference finals, I think 4 or 5 times in his career and never getting over that hump, just the fact that he's able to be there now, even if they don't win it, has got to be such a great feather in his cap, and to finally get at least some of that monkey off of his back. Certainly really, really nice to see that as well. And, obviously, just kind of my thoughts on the whole Eastern Conference Finals. I'm very, very glad that the Celtics won. And I'm happy with me because, I did kind of, and I say kind of, I definitely did. I kind of gave up after Game 3. I was like, I'm sick and tired of seeing the Celtics always come this close and blowing it because they don't want it bad enough. Like, I've seen it so many times, and I'm so glad that even when the Celtics lost Game 6, I kind of took it in perspective of how well the Celtics have played after they've lost, how well the Celtics have played on the road in Miami, and kind of thinking that Jimmy Butler wasn't going to drop 47, 9, and 8, or 47, 11, and 8, or whatever he dropped in Game 6 again. He wasn't going to do that again. He might drop 35 or 40, but he's not going to do 47 again. And, they pulled it out. They pulled it out by, the hair on their chinny chin. And they don't have full beards like me. At least most of them don't. So, not a lot of hair down there. But they pulled it out. And I'm so happy that I was able to keep it in perspective. And not give up. And not truly believe that we were going to lose that game. For a minute there, I thought we were going to blow it, but they didn't. So, they did just enough to win. And sometimes, I've talked about it before on this podcast, sometimes you got to just surprise roll up somebody. Get the 1, 2, 3, and run out of the ring as fast as you can. And that's kind of what the Celtics did. They survived. And they move on to the next one. Now, that being said, I'm an hour into this, and it's time to talk about my predictions and what I think the keys are for both teams in this NBA Finals. And I'm going to lean back in my chair for this one because this series is really difficult for me to predict because I have seen a lot of Celtics basketball over the last, 15 years of my life. And I have seen a lot of Warriors basketball over the last 8 years of my life because obviously I love playoff basketball in all forms, and I watch the NBA Finals every year. And for the last 8 years, the Warriors have been in the finals 6 times. And so I've watched them in the playoffs. I've watched them on Christmas Day when they're playing the Cavaliers with LeBron James, or when they're playing, the Thunder with KD. I saw Steph Curry hit that ridiculous shot in Oklahoma City from like 40 feet out when he could have not taken the shot and just drill it. Like, I've seen the Warriors evolve into this just juggernaut that they have now become. And I have never seen the Celtics play basketball like this. And I have seen the Big Three era. I was a little bit younger at the time. I was 10, 11. And that was an amazing era to watch. But they had 3 All-Stars on their team that you knew exactly what you were going to get every single night. Whether they won or whether they lost, you knew what you were going to get. And then eventually, as Rajon Rondo developed into another All-Star, you had 4 All-Stars on your team that you knew what you were going to get every single night, whether they won or lost. You knew the effort, you knew the passion, you knew the play style, you knew that Ray Allen was going to hit a bunch of threes, you knew that Paul Pierce was going to be really, really tough to defend, you knew that KG was going to be that defensive stalwart that's going to hit you some mid-range shots and back you down in the post. And you knew that Rajon Rondo was going to probably make a pass that you sat and said, I don't know if I've ever seen that before. That's what you knew you were going to get every night. And then when the Big Three era ended, I saw the new era of Celtics where, let's be honest, didn't really have a lot of good players. And by a lot, I mean barely any. They really didn't have any good players. We were rebuilding through the draft. We were starting over with a new head coach and new players and, all this stuff. And, your best player was Avery Bradley for a few years. No disrespect to Avery Bradley, but should never be a number 1 option in the NBA. And again, he was a 20-point-per-game scorer. He was very good, but he should not have been a number 1. He shouldn't have had to be put in that position. Jeff Green was our number 1 option for a little bit. And again, no disrespect to Jeff Green. Young Jeff Green was a lot of fun to watch. Should never have been a number 1 option. So, those years were tough to watch because the Celtics lost all the time. But you still kind of knew what you were going to get every night. You still sort of knew the defensive effort and the kind of play style that you were going to get every single night. Whether they won or whether they probably lost, you knew what you were going to get. Then you draft Marcus Smart. Then you bring Isaiah Thomas into the fold. You bring Al Horford into the fold. Now you've got this team where you've got all these young guys, all these young draft picks. You've got Al Horford, a big free agent signing, and you've got Isaiah Thomas who's playing at an MVP level. You kind of knew that the Celtics' record wasn't indicative to how much of a championship contender they were. But you still, again, I've said this a million times already, knew what you were going to get every single night. And it was amazing. It was so much fun to watch. And only in the last 2, maybe 3 years have I sat and said, I have no idea what Celtics team I'm going to sit and I'm going to watch. I have no idea because the Celtic team that is, for the most part, constructed the way now that it was then, obviously with different players in different roles, but in terms of, the core of Al Horford, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Marcus Smart, Al left for a couple of years, but for the most part, it's the same core that was there in 2019 when we almost beat LeBron. So, I sit there and I say, this is the same team, not the same team, this is clearly a much different style team, but this is the same core that those memories are attached with. The team that so underperformed and didn't show up and didn't give a lot of effort or energy. Now, a lot of that I know now is contributed to Kyrie Irving because his personality and his attitude is just so piss poor. And a lot of that can also be contributed to Gordon Hayward being injured all the time. And then when Kemba Walker came over, Kemba Walker being injured all the time and just not really being able to get that consistency. But you still turned on the TV and you knew that it did not matter how much the Celtics were up in the third quarter when you were watching the game. They had a chance to lose. There was never 1 second of the last 2 years of watching Celtics basketball, or 3 years of watching Celtics basketball, that in the third quarter I would turn the game off and went, yep, I 100% know they're going to win this one. Not once. Because the Celtics had just this insane ability to just crumble. Crumble completely under any sort of regular season pressure. Never mind postseason pressure. Regular season pressure on a random Thursday night against the 500 New York Knicks or the, lowly Detroit Pistons. We could blow a 30-point lead or a 25-point lead. And it was really upsetting. Now, it didn't happen every night, obviously. And there were honestly some nights where the Celtics were the ones that were coming back from 25 points down. I remember when we faced the Spurs, I think it might have been last year or 2 years ago, whatever it was, when Jason Tatum dropped like 60 points. Celtics were down like 35 points, in the second quarter. They were just playing horrible. Ended up coming back and winning the game in overtime. Houston Rockets, back 2 or 3 years ago. Celtics were down 26 at one point in that game, and I watched that whole game from start to finish. Celtics came all the way back. Marcus Smart drew those 2 offensive fouls on James Harden. It was beautiful, and they came back. I've seen some of those games, but I've also seen a lot more games where the opposite happened. So, when I think about that, I still attribute those memories to the team that's going to go out there on Thursday and try and compete for the NBA Finals. And, can you blame me? Because they did that earlier this year against the Knicks. They blew a 25-point lead in the fourth quarter against the Knicks. So, it's not as if there's 3 years of difference between that and what's happening now. I just, 3 days ago, or however many days ago it was, watched the Celtics go from up 13 to up 2 when the Heat had the ball like that. But in the blink of an eye, your dreams as a Celtics fan started to crumble. It's still there. That horrible habit of just crumbling under pressure is still there. It's not all the way there to the point where it's ruining their chances of winning series yet, but it is still there. So I am a little concerned in that regard because the Warriors, by contrast, are a team that will put you in the ground in a matter of a minute and a half if you let them. They will put up 18 points in a minute if you let them. With their active hands-on defense, their way of getting out in transition, and the fact that they have shooters at almost every position, including 2 of the best, if not the 2 best shooters in the history of the world, that, again, I've seen Klay Thompson go and drop 38 or 37 or whatever it was points in a quarter. So you can't look at me and tell me that the Warriors just won't do that. because they will if you let them. If you even show a little bit of weakness or fear of the moment, it's over. The Warriors will put you in the dirt in a matter of a minute, and you will have no chance of coming back. None. You'll look up and it's 19-0 in the first. Done. Game's over. You're not coming back against the Warriors down 19 with all those great shooters on that team. It's not happening. So, yeah, I'm concerned about that. On the Warriors side, I am concerned about the fact that they have had such an easy road to the finals. Now, Dallas's defense was pretty good. They didn't play like they were pretty good against the Warriors, but they were really good this year. And unlike the Mavericks, the Celtics do not just have one guy that can beat you. You've got multiple guys. You've got Jason Tatum, obviously. Jaylen Brown is one of the best Robins in basketball, and by that I mean obviously Batman and Robin. Jason Tatum is, he's Batman, let's be honest, and Jaylen Brown is Robin. So, he's one of the best Robins in the league right now. If not the very best, with Chris Middleton being out and injured. And Kyrie Irving being not there for half of the time. So, there's not a lot of better Robins out there than than Jaylen Brown. So, you got two right there. And you also have Al Horford, who, again, he's not going to drop 30 every night. But if you just leave him out there, he'll hurt you. He'll burn you. You've got Marcus Smart, who, again, he's not going to put up 15 or 20 points every night. But if you let him, he will shoot 15 or 20 times, and he'll put 25 points on you. He's not as horrendous of a shooter as he used to be. He's still not great. Honestly, to me, he's still not very good. But he's, if he shoots 33, 35% from three and puts up, 10 or 11 or 12 threes, he's going to put 12 points just on threes on you. He's going to hit 4 of them. And then, he'll get to the free throw line. He might make a couple of contested layups. And suddenly he's got 20 points. Along with Jason Tatum, who's probably going to drop 25 or 30. Along with Jaylen Brown, who, most of the time anyway, is probably going to put up 20. And then, of course, you still got Al Horford. You got Rob Williams, who I've seen him get 12 or 15 points in a game. If, that lob threat is there, and he's, fully healthy. And the Warriors do not have a lot of size. They play small ball a lot. Kevon Looney is their really only true center. And so when they go small, their quote-unquote death lineup is Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, Jordan Poole, and Draymond Green. So that's a really small lineup because Klay Thompson isn't all that big. Steph Curry obviously isn't all that big. Jordan Poole's only 6'3" or 6'4". Andrew Wiggins is twitchy, but he's not all that tall. He's only like 6'6". And then Draymond's only 6'7". So you don't have a ton of big size in that death lineup. Obviously, you have Kevon Looney, but that's your only guy that you have to worry about in terms of just pure size on the interior. So I think, quite frankly, if Robert Williams is healthy enough to not be a defensive and offensive liability, he can really make a huge difference because as a lob threat, the Warriors have nothing to stop him. Nothing to stop him on the interior. I don't think Kevon Looney's going to stop him. I don't even think Draymond Green is going to stop him because, it's hard to stop that from happening. And if Draymond's covering Robert Williams, then that means that one of your other 4 better offensive players are going to be left with a mismatch. So even if Draymond is trying to shut down Rob Williams, cool. That means he's not guarding Jason Tatum, he's not guarding Jaylen Brown, he's not guarding Al, and he's not guarding Marcus. Woohoo! I don't want him to guard those guys because he's capable of slowing them down. So, great if that's the case. I don't think that will be the case. He'll probably be one of the main guys that's going to be in charge of stopping Jason Tatum. But if he is playing the 5, it's going to be hard to justify him playing on Jason Tatum all the time, because that means that somebody's going to have to guard Al that's way, way overmatched physically. So, what do you do if you're the Warriors in that scenario? Are you banking on the fact that you're just going to outshoot the Celtics to where they feel like they have to go small too? And even if they do go small, Grant Williams is only 6'6" or 6'7", but he's basically the Celtics version of Draymond Green without the playmaking, where, he can guard 1 through 5, but unlike Draymond, he's a 40% three-point shooter. So you have to step out and guard him. You cannot just leave him open in the corner and let him shoot all day, because he showed you in Game 7 against Milwaukee, if you let him shoot 15 times, he will make 6 or 7 of those shots from 3. He shot, 18 times and made 7? That's 21 points right there. So you can't just not guard him. So, and again, what do you do if you're the Warriors in that scenario? You've got to guard him. Do you let Steph Curry go guard Grant Williams? Which, if that's the case, Grant Williams is just going to back him down and overpower him. Do you let Klay Thompson guard him? Maybe. But that means that he's not guarding Jaylen Brown and he's not guarding Jason Tatum. Which means that either Stephen Curry is guarding one of those two, or Jordan Poole is guarding one of those two, and that's not good. That is a not good scenario if you are the Warriors. So I think that the Celtics present a very interesting matchup nightmare for the Warriors. Now, this might all work out for the Warriors. They might end up being right. They might sit there and think, well, our death lineup is going to be so effective offensively that it's not going to matter on defense, because we're going to score 3 points and they're going to score 2 every time, and we're going to win. Maybe that's the case. But if it doesn't work, it's going to be really difficult for the Warriors to adjust, because they do not have any answer in terms of size. The Milwaukee Bucks, one of the reasons they presented such a crazy challenge for the Celtics is because they had so much size. If it wasn't Brook Lopez, it was Bobby Portis. If it wasn't Bobby Portis, it was Brook Lopez. It just kind of, you kind of went back and forth there. You had 2 centers all the time, and that's not including Giannis, who's also 6'11" and 250 pounds. So there were a lot of times where those 3 guys were on the court at the same time. You couldn't go anywhere. There were no passing lanes. You couldn't shoot over them. What do you do? So that's one of the reasons why they were such a matchup nightmare, is because they were one of the few teams in the NBA that could match the Celtics' size and athleticism in the big man position. The Celtics are one of the few teams that still run a 2 big guy lineup. And so you're not taking Al Horford off the floor, because Al Horford can guard anybody. He might not be able to stay in front of Steph Curry all the time, but you're not going to ask him to do that. At least, I hope they're not going to ask him to do that, because that's not going to work out very well for them. But, he's going to probably guard a Klay Thompson or a Draymond Green or Andrew Wiggins. That's what his. I would put him on Andrew Wiggins if it was me. But nonetheless, that's what's going to happen if you're Golden State is you're going to have to face, at the very least, a lineup with Al Horford and Grant Williams, which still, against your death lineup, is going to have size on you. And it's not like Al Horford is a traditional center that can't guard any perimeter players. He can, and he will. And Grant Williams certainly can guard anybody of any size at any point. So you're going to have to face that. And that's, again, notwithstanding Robert Williams, who, he's not the greatest perimeter defender in the world in terms of guarding guards, but his leaping ability, he's going to be able to block shots, or at the very least alter them. And if you get by your matchup, he's going to be in the paint and ready to swat it. It's not going to happen every time, but it's going to happen enough that you're going to think about it. So for the Warriors, that's what concerns me, is the matchups against the Celtics have real potential to cause you a lot of problems, if not corrected. If the Celtics can get a lot of stops and really keep contesting these threes, the Warriors are going to have a hard time scoring, because without Steph Curry and Klay Thompson shooting a lot of threes and making a lot of threes, Jordan Poole's offense will not be nearly as effective against the Celtics, because they have much better perimeter defenders and much better interior defenders that can stop his drives. And, he's going to have to shoot a lot of contested mid-range jumpers, which if you're the Celtics, you'll take that. If Jordan Poole beats you because he shoots 8 of 10 on, contested mid-range jumpers, tip your cap and play the next game, because it's not going to happen again. As good as Jordan Poole is, it's not going to happen with the Celtics defense. So the Celtics defense has real potential to cause a lot of problems. Now, another thing that concerns me about the Celtics is their defense itself, and the way that they function is they switch all the time. All the time. Maybe not 100% of the time, but like 90% of the time they are switching everything. Because they feel like they can switch 1 through 5 and still be okay, because even if somebody goes by, if you've got a guard on a big guy out in the perimeter, Al Horford can hold his own, and Rob Williams' leaping ability, he can block the shot. And even if they go by him, the other big guy is probably going to be in the paint and help, and, you got other guys to collapse and help and switch. So it makes sense. But here is where their defense and their switching defense hurts them. One, you're going to probably get a lot, if you switch everything, of the Warriors trying to get Steph Curry on Robert Williams, or Steph Curry on Grant Williams, or Steph Curry on Al Horford. Now, they're good perimeter defenders, but Steph Curry has made a living of making big men look like soup in terms of just shooting over them with the greatest of ease. He's the greatest shooter in the history of this earth or any other. So it's going to be tough if you're going to keep switching like that and getting big guys out on Steph Curry all the time. But also, when they switch, usually that leaves kind of a bit of a space. So if you've watched, the Heat gave them a lot of problems with this at times in the series, where the Heat would just screen and screen and screen and screen and screen all day long until one of their shooters got a millimeter of space, because the Celtics couldn't get around the screen in a blink of an eye, and the help couldn't get there, because obviously you can't just, immediately run up, because then you're going to have a guy just cutting to the rim wide open. So you have to kind of give it a second to make sure, you're in the right position and you know what this guy's going to do. And in that millisecond, Steph Curry and Klay Thompson can rise up and just make everything. So that does scare me. And Jaylen Brown, as great of a perimeter defender as he is, Jason Tatum, as great of a perimeter defender as he is, both of those guys are, I'm not going to say really bad, because Jason Tatum specifically is not really bad at it, but neither of them are particularly good at efficiently getting around screens, especially Jaylen Brown. He struggles a lot navigating around screens. And with all these Warriors players, other than Draymond, you have to go over screens, or they're just going to shoot over you. Even Andrew Wiggins has shown that you probably are going to have to go over screens. It's not as much. You can get away with it a little more often against Andrew Wiggins, but you're not getting away with it against Poole or Thompson or Curry. You have to go over all these screens. And Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are not that great at navigating around screens, especially when you have to go over screens. Now, Kevon Looney is a decent screen setter. He's nothing like Bam Adebayo. He's nothing like Brook Lopez, and he's nothing like Giannis, who are three of the best screen setters in the NBA. I think Steven Adams is the best screen setter in the NBA, but those other three guys that I mentioned are right near the top of the list. They are fantastic. Draymond Green, however, is a very good screen setter. So, it is and the Warriors don't stop. I mean, anybody who's watched the Warriors play, not even just this year, but any year for the last 8 years, they don't stop. They screen and run and screen and run and screen and run. And all they need is enough space for their hand to go here and their wrist to go there. And they can hurt you. So that scares me about the Celtics as well. And one more thing that scares me about the Warriors is which Andrew Wiggins is going to show up. Now, Andrew Wiggins played very well against Dallas. But there have been times in this postseason and in the regular season where he is a non-factor. Especially against defenses that understand the kind of player that he is. And the Celtics are not dumb. They know that they don't want Steph Curry beating them. They don't want Klay Thompson beating them. And they don't want Jordan Poole beating them. If you can stop, or at least slow down, all three of those guys, what the Celtics are going to tell you is they're going to look you dead in the eye and say, Andrew Wiggins, if you beat us, congrats. Because I don't think you can. And even Andrew Wiggins at his best is not going to beat these Celtics. If they can slow down all three of those guys, which, I mean, you could say that they will, but they probably won't slow down all three every night because that's a crazy notion to think that that's possible. I highly doubt it might be, but it'd be really tough to slow all three of those guys down at the same time. You'd have to be so absurdly locked in on defense, it's not even funny. But if somehow they manage to pull it off, Andrew Wiggins is not beating the Celtics by himself, even at his best. But let's say they don't shut down all three. Let's say they shut down two. Let's say Steph Curry is, 2 for 9 from 3 and only has 13 points in the third quarter, and Jordan Poole's only got 8 points. Klay Thompson's got like 27, though. He's playing really well. The Warriors' win or loss in that game will hinge solely on how well Andrew Wiggins is performing. If Andrew Wiggins stinks in that game, the Warriors will lose. Because I don't think they have enough on defense to stop every weapon on the Celtics. I think that they can slow down Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown a little bit, but that's about it. They don't have enough on defense to really slow down these guys all the time. Andrew Wiggins is a decent stopper on defense. He can go a stretch of really shutting a guy down. But you're not gonna think that Andrew Wiggins is gonna shut down Jason Tatum for 48 minutes. It's not happening. He's not shutting down Jaylen Brown for 48 minutes either. Or at least I don't think that they will. I don't think he will. I don't think anybody on that team will. But it's possible. We've seen, guys like PJ Tucker and other players like Bruce Brown, although him less so because the Celtics swept that series. But guys like that are just going in and somehow still slowing down Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. We've seen it in this postseason, but I just don't think, considering the level of competition the Celtics have had to go through to get to the finals, that the Warriors' not super physical defense is going to get to them. I just don't see it. All right. What you guys have been waiting for, my prediction. Again, I said it at the beginning, or at least the beginning of this segment. It's really hard to predict this series because there are so many variables. I'm not kidding, I could really see a scenario where the Celtics sweep the Warriors. And I can see a scenario where the Warriors sweep the Celtics. I can see this series going 7 and the Celtics winning on the road. I could see it going 7 and the Warriors dominating at home. I could see this series going 5 games. I could see it going 6 games. There are so many possibilities depending on all the variables. Because I'll tell you this, if Andrew Wiggins shows up and drops 20 a night, it's over. The Celtics aren't winning the series. You're telling me that Jordan Poole's going to show up, Steph Curry's going to show up, Klay Thompson's going to show up, and Andrew Wiggins? No, it's over. You're not stopping. If all 4 of them are clicking, you're not winning. It's just not happening. You just don't have enough firepower if you're the Celtics or anybody to stop that from happening. Like, you're going to lose. But if 2 or 3 of those guys don't really show up, you're probably going to get crushed if you're the Warriors, because on offense, you don't have a lot outside of those core 4. At least the Celtics, on certain nights, can have Marcus Smart. On certain nights, can have Al Horford. On certain nights, can have Grant Williams. On certain nights, can have Derek White. I've seen it happen. So there's at least, if Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are not playing super well, there's a chance that some of those guys have stepped up. But if Jordan Poole, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, if some or all of those guys are not stepping up, you don't have anything outside those four. You think that if Steph Curry's getting shut down, Jonathan Kuminga is going to be the guy that's going to drop 25 and get... No. No offense to Jonathan Kuminga, but if you're shutting down Steph Curry, you're probably going to be able to figure out Jonathan Kuminga too. So I can see an infinite number of scenarios and an infinite number of ways as to how this series could go. But you're not here to hear about that. You all want me to tell you what I think is going to happen. And I'm gonna eat these words, I'm sure, because again, this series could go in so many ways, it's almost impossible to predict. I've seen people picking Celtics in 6 and Warriors in 4. And Warriors in 7, Celtics in 7. It's in terms of the scenarios, it's a coin flip. It's a coin flip. So what does it come down to? What is the difference? Experience. Experience has always and will always be the difference to me. The ability to not take things too personally and not get too low, not get too high, and stay the same whether you win or whether you lose is so important in a 7-game series when it's just you and one other team. You can't ask for help. You don't have much of a break in between these games to make a ton of adjustments. It is you versus them and who wants it more. At this point in the season, both teams have injuries. Both teams have guys that are hurting. Both teams are exhausted. Both teams probably just want to go home and spend some time with their families. So to me, experience is the thing that's going to get you over the hump. The Boston Celtics have had an amazing, wonderful season. They have showed the NBA world what their potential for the future is. They have. And if they win the championship this year, it will be almost miraculous considering where they were 3 months ago when they were the 11 seed in the East. It's an incredible journey. We haven't seen something like this before. The Celtics are battle-tested. Through this postseason, they have battled the 2 best players in the world in Kevin Durant and Giannis, superstar Jimmy Butler, and, yeah, Kyrie Irving's a fantastic player too. They have had the much tougher road, so they are battle-tested in this postseason. But the Warriors are battle-tested for 8 years. They are finals-tested. Now, for the 6th time in 8 years, they are right back where they should be in the finals. Just to compare, there are 3 guys on the Warriors that have been to now 6 finals. That's Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, Draymond Green, obviously. That's 18 finals appearances just between the 3 of them. The Boston Celtics total roster has 0 finals appearances in their entire careers. 0. There is not a single player on the Celtics that has ever been to the finals. Their head coach has been to more finals as a coach in the last 3 years than, or in the last 10 years, or however long it's been, than the Celtics have. Their entire team. Their coach has been to more finals. So, to me, the difference is experience. I cannot pick the Celtics as much as I want to, and as much as my heart wants to, and honestly, as much as the analytics are telling me to. The analytics, I don't remember what website it was, but they gave the Celtics an 83% chance to win the series because of their defensive metrics. It's incredible. And I hear all that, and I see all that, and I understand all that, and I am acknowledging right now that it might happen. The Celtics might very well win the finals. But there is not a team in the world that can prepare you for the Warriors. There's not an offense in the NBA, in the G League, overseas, in travel ball, in AAU, in high school, in college. It doesn't matter. There's not a single offense that will ever be able to prepare you for the Golden State Warriors. And let's be honest with ourselves. Yeah, you got KD and Kyrie, but the rest of their team, they had nothing on offense. Yeah, you had Giannis, but the rest of their team, you had nothing on offense. Yeah, you had Jimmy Butler, and you had Tyler Hero, but Tyler Hero was hurt for a bunch of the games, and the rest of the guys were hurt or just weren't very good on offense. The Golden State Warriors are so absurdly good on offense. There's not a team on the planet that can prepare you for what they bring. And unlike the 3 teams that the Celtics have played, they will absolutely torch you from 3. The Heat aren't going to torch you from 3. Yeah, they had the best 3-point percentage of any team in the NBA, but Duncan Robinson was out of the rotation, so that's basically your best 3-pointer on the bench, best 3-point shooter on the bench. And if he's not your best 3-point shooter, Tyler Hero is your best 3-point shooter, and he barely played. Kyle Lowry, decent 3-point shooter, very, very inefficient from there, though. Only shoots about 34%. PJ Tucker shoots at a decent percentage, but only shoots 1, 2, maybe 3 or 4 a game. Doesn't shoot a ton. And Jimmy Butler, your best player, shoots about 30% from downtown. They couldn't, and Bam Adebayo doesn't shoot 3. So they could not beat you from 3 consistently every night. They might get hot one night like they did in Game 6, but other than that, they're not beating you from 3 every night. I forgot about Max Strus because who cares? He went 0 for 18 from the field for 3 games. I don't care about Max Strus. Great, you're a former Celtic. You're an undrafted player that ends in the starting lineup in the playoffs. Good for you. I'm very happy for you, but you're not super relevant in this conversation. You're a good 3-point shooter, but you're very inconsistent. They're not going to beat you from 3 like that every night, but the Warriors will. They've struggled a couple times this postseason from 3. They have, but they're not going to do that every night. They're going to make 3s no matter what you do. And the Celtics haven't faced a team like that yet. Now, the Warriors haven't been tested this postseason yet, so it's going to be interesting to see how they respond to the Celtics' aggressiveness and physicality because they just have not faced that yet. But my prediction, Warriors in 7. I think the Warriors will win in 7 games. As much as I want to pick the Celtics, if they go to a Game 7, I highly doubt that they are going to win in Game 7, in the finals, in San Francisco. It's just not happening because the Warriors have been there before. Now, yes, the Golden State Warriors have played 1 Game 7 in Golden State and lost it to Cleveland. But that was before the Warriors had all this experience. They had a little bit, but they didn't have all this experience. They didn't get all of that success. Now they do. Now they have that trial to think back on. They know that they have to come out and show out in Game 7 if it gets there. So I think that the Celtics will probably steal a game in Golden State in the first 2 games just because of their physicality. I would say they might even win Game 1. They're going to lose Game 2. They're going to win Game 3. They're going to lose Game 4. They're going to lose Game 5. They're going to protect home court in Game 6 and tie the series 3-3. But in Game 7, the Warriors will probably be too much. That is my prediction. Warriors in 7. I hope it doesn't happen. I'm sure my Celtics fans that are watching are probably going to be upset. But I just cannot pick the Celtics with all of the lack of experience that they have. And again, in my heart, I am picking the Celtics all the way. And I truly believe that they can win this series. I've said it before. I can see a million scenarios where the Celtics not only win, but run away with the series. I really can see that. But you still have to go out and you still have to play these games. And for me, I think it's more likely that the battle-tested Warriors, who have been to these finals way too many times to count, are going to know what to do versus the Celtics, who, let's be honest with ourselves, guys, they don't finish games well. They just don't. I talked about it at length, blowing huge leads. If the Celtics don't blow out the Warriors every night, they will not win this series. Because, again, the Warriors, if they smell any blood in the water, will run you out of the gym. If the Celtics do what they did against the Heat in Game 7 to the Warriors, if they're up 13 with 2 minutes left and they show an inkling of weakness, they'll lose by 10. They won't just barely hold on. They will lose by 10. Like, the Warriors will put up 28 points like that if you show any weakness. So, if it's a close game in the end, I have no confidence that the Celtics will be able to hold on. None. And I need them to prove me wrong, because that's the only way they'll win this series. And, I talked about a lot of my concerns. That's my biggest one for the Celtics. They can't close games. They never have been able to close games. All season. I mean, even look at their winning streak. They were not playing in these close games. They were killing teams. They were running off the floor 30, 40, 45, 50 points. They didn't have to finish games. They could play their bench players for the entire second half and it wouldn't have mattered. But in the playoffs, in the finals, you have to be able to close games. And the Warriors have been there time and time and time again. They will be able to close games because I've seen them be able to close games, and I know that they have that ability. The Celtics, I just haven't seen it yet. I honestly, not only have I not seen it yet, I've seen the exact opposite. I have seen every close game in the postseason that has come down to the wire with only one, maybe two exceptions, the Celtics have lost. Before Game 7, they were 1-4 in clutch time games, which means a 5-point game with 5 or less minutes left. If the Celtics were in a close game, they lost almost every single time. And by the way, Game 7 didn't become a clutch time game until like 40 seconds left in the game, and the Celtics still almost lost. So, again, to me, I have not seen the Celtics be able to close out games in a way that gives me confidence against a team like the Warriors, who has been there and done that. So, Warriors in 7 is my prediction. But again, I could see this going Celtics in 6. I could see it going Warriors in 5. I could see if the Celtics can't close out games, doesn't matter how well they play, the Warriors will just win every game because the Celtics can't close out the games. I could see that scenario happening fairly easily, quite frankly. If it's a 6-point game with 3 minutes left, I will have zero confidence that the Celtics would be able to hang on in those scenarios. Really, I do. And again, I feel terrible saying that, but any Celtics fan that has watched not only this year, but the last 2-3 years, you feel my pain. You've seen it. I just saw it on Saturday. Or Sunday, whatever day Game 7 was. So it's still there, and so I still have that concern. So, again, final prediction, Warriors in 7. And that's going to do it for this week's podcast. Again, a lot of basketball, a lot of talk about all that stuff, and I really had a great time doing it. And I'm just so grateful that I get to do this in long form and talk about my thoughts and talk about the game that I love so very much. I played baseball in college, and baseball has always been my sport since I was a kid. But as I've gotten older, my love for basketball has just grown more and more and more and more. And it's just, I truly believe that basketball is where I belong. And calling it, announcing it, talking about it, that's where I feel the most comfortable. So just the fact that I get to do that, even if it's only in front of a few people, it's such a blessing. So thank you guys so much for watching. And again, go Celtics. Hopefully the next time I do this, we'll be up in the series and I'll be happy and jolly and we'll get to talk about it some more. Got some big interviews coming up in the next couple of weeks. I've got Ashlyn Moran a basketball player from Johnson University, or a former basketball player from Johnson University, I should say. We're going to talk basketball. We'll talk the NBA playoffs. It's going to be a lot of fun. And I got some other interviews lined up as well, but you have to wait to hear that. So if you stay all the way to the end, you got a little bit of a sneak peek for what's coming up. But nonetheless, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.
Hey guys, me again. I just want to say thank you so much for checking out the Lopes Goes Last podcast. It means the world to me that you decided to stick all the way to the end. That's super cool. So thank you again. And if you really, really like what you see, I'd love for you to subscribe, like the video, and share it with all your family and friends because, you know, this is my passion project. This is what I love to do, and I really want the sucker to grow. And the only way that that can happen is through you guys, is if you guys can help me out. So again, if you like what you saw, please subscribe, like the video, share with all your friends and family. That's the only way this is going to grow. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time.